received a microaggression from a minority woman who is surrendered to assimilation. That's what I'm naming it now. It's these minorities that are in sunken places that are surrendered to assimilation, upholding pillars of white supremacy. And they also begin to echo the harmful violence that their white counterparts and friends and circles that they run in do towards other people. And so that's why, again, like just to give another example of violence, it's not just always white people. It's minorities or anybody that upholds pillars of white supremacy, and anyone that is surrendered to assimilation, that chooses to participate in that type of psychological ideology that causes harm to anybody that's of a different ethnicity. And so, but when you receive the religion of Jesus, when you receive the religion of Jesus, you are receiving a religion that is of liberation and abolition. Come on now.
Welcome to our book club.
One of our favorites, truly.
Yes, it's been such a joy reading this book.
I love it.
If you don't know, my name is Kendall Dooley, and you can find me on the Instagrams at dooley.kendall, or on Twitter as well, under Kendall Dooley.
I don't know if we have to do our our Instagram and stuff for this one because it's only for Patreons. They already know who we are. But I don't want to. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
If you don't know, now you know. You can find me there. What about you, babe? Share with the people.
I am Erin Dooley, and you can find me on Instagram, Erin V. Lashley. It's probably going to stay that way because I'm changing my middle name to Victoria-Lashley. So, anyways, let's get right into it, babe.
Yeah, go for it, babe. What stood out to you in this next chapter?
No,
chapter
I wanted you to start. This is chapter 2.
Of Jesus and the Disinherited.
On chapter 2, a chapter called Fear.
A chapter called Fear.
Gosh. I want you to start because I feel like I really enjoy hearing your thoughts, and then I like building off of it and like tree
like
branches.
A tree branching out.
Yeah.
One of my thoughts, I feel bad because I'd actually read ahead. And so now I got to go back to gather all my thoughts on the Fear chapter.
You didn't want to read it in your actual book?
Yeah, I took notes. I'm actually borrowing this book from a friend. Thank you, friend Stacy. And so I didn't want to write in her book. And so I got it for free online. And so I wanted to keep my notes and stuff in there and all my highlights and things.
Yeah.
But what's cool about these next 3 chapters, fear, deception, and hate that he lays out, is he mentions all of that in the first chapter, and he basically says these 3 things, he calls them the hounds of the disinherited. Kind of these are the dogs, the hounds that are grasping at the feet of those who are the marginalized, and those who are the disinherited. Which when I first read that, I interpreted it as man, this is something that's done against them. This is something that's done against the marginalized and those who are left out from those who have power and the strong. This is something that's done to them. And so I went to this chapter and all these next chapters kind of thinking that, but I was oh, he's actually saying something that's even more powerful. He says this is something that those who are the disinherited, those who are in the margins, this is something that they feel and that they experience and their attitude towards things that is that's not allowing them to be their full selves. This is something that's not allowing them to be a full person who's embracing the religion of Jesus.
Yeah.
When they really take these things that they're feeling and these attributes that they're feeling and kind of internalize them. And so I was oh, that's interesting. So because he makes the enemy not exactly the underlying enemy is is these evil systems and oppressive systems that we need to be liberated from. But he also calls out the enemy that doesn't allow us to engage with those, kind of as he was talking about the resistance and non-resistance. Like we're not able to engage and actually become liberated if we don't deal with this stuff first.
Yeah.
If we don't deal in this chapter with fear and the stuff first, we can't truly fight for liberation. Which I was like, man, that's even more thought-provoking than what I thought what it was going to be before, where it paints the oppressive systems and people as the enemies and how we overcome them. But it's like, no, these are actually, you have to overcome this within yourself first in order to engage these oppressive systems.
Yeah. I really like the way that he sets this up when it comes to fear, and I don't want to jump to the conclusion of the chapter, but I kind of have to. Just with the thought.
Can if you want.
It's just
go for it.
Well, one, I'm reading this in the context of my own life, right? It's like I'm so identifying with this fear feeling that anytime I'm interacting with white people, I am often, without having language for it up until this point, often trying to calculate the risk of harm that will be done to me if I try to explain my experience as a Black woman in America to someone who calls me their friend, which I can't call them my friend anymore because that's a whole different story. But it's just wild that is the actual calculation because if I say truth to you in this context, will you hear me and understand me, or will you harm me without even realizing it? Or will you harm me intentionally? Because that's another way to do it. That happens. And so it's really interesting as he breaks down in this chapter, I feel like he breaks down the psychological impacts of fear on Black people and what it does to your body, what it does to your brain, what it does to your identity. Yeah. Which also, in the context of my own life as a pastor, it emphasizes the importance, especially to people of color, the importance of forming people, the spiritual formation around being loved by God and being a child of God. Because yes, that is so true, which taps into some of the genealogy stuff that we've been tapping into and getting into your history. Yes, we were slaves, but before we were slaves, we were free. And that is so liberating to me because you must speak to, before your oppressor came into the picture, who were you? You were a child of God. You were loved, and you are a child of God, and you are loved. And he's speaking to what that does for people when they're living in oppressive societies and when they are living in the presence of an oppressor, is that you must awaken the identity in them that identifies with the love of God and identifies with being a child of God. Because one who has that has, I forget the word he uses, but it's almost like a courage that cannot be explained, where you are able to walk through and maneuver throughout life almost as if you are unharmed. That is not an excuse for people who are oppressive. That is not an excuse for oppressors, but it is a way for oppressed people to navigate oppression when you can tap into your identity, which is being loved by God and being his child. So that's been really impactful for me.
No, I think that's really good. I think you summarized. I think you summarized the chapter. Well, I don't got nothing else to add. but I mean, it's true, and like I knew you would like this chapter because I read it, and I was like, oh, babe, you're gonna like this chapter because in your own story, like you found the power in like EMDR, through therapy, to like kind of look within yourself and relinquish some of this stuff that happened in the past that has like impacted your body in the now, and how to like reverse some of that, where I feel like this hits on some of that trauma that Black people experience and how it causes us to navigate in society. I think what is one thing I have, he says that in this one sentence, he says, the threat of violence is ever present, and there is no way to determine precisely when it may come crushing down upon you. And so it's like when Black people, and like this book, right, it's so prophetic for its time and even now. It's like when we see Black people being killed, when we see George Floyd being killed, Breonna Taylor being shot, then that's like, man, that could be me.
Yeah.
That person looks like me. That person the same color as me. That person has relatives like I have relatives. That person lives in a way that I live like. And that causes you to live in this fear, right? That there's, and he's like, he talks about physical violence and says like, that's why we live in fear. But then he even goes to say it's even this, just the violence of systems and things at play.
Yeah.
But this is even just a case, an example of physical violence, of police that have killed black men and women. And it's like, that's on television, that's on our phones, and we're seeing that. And that causes us to like want to live a certain way and walk around a certain way, where now when we see police, we're kind of like, and we can feel it in our bodies. And so he named some of that, of like, man, and he names the reality of it, of like, man, like black people, they've had to like live because of this violence, and that's done to people who are disadvantaged and oppressed. They always kind of navigate life under this kind of like fear of always like, man, what's gonna happen? I got to be careful how I do this. I got to be careful how I do that.
Keep going, my battery died, but it's still recording.
Is it still recording? Good.
This is the same thing that happened last time. I forgot to change the battery.
Yeah. Got to do that. Hopefully you guys can still hear us and see what's going on. But yeah, you begin to navigate in fear because of what you see, what's been done to your people, and what could be done to your people, because the system's made an example out of them. And so the example that he gives is going to India. And again, this book was written after his trip to India. He talks about going to India and how a individual told him, he and his friends, like, hey, like, there are like snakes. I can't remember. I think he said the specific snake, but I can't remember, like poisonous, dangerous snake. Like
Cobra,
there was
maybe.
I don't think it's like cobra. Okay. I can't remember. But he just said some dangerous snake that's around. They'll kind of pop up different places. Like you want to watch out for them. If you're bit by this snake, he's like, it's game over, and kind of really created this big threat for them and said, like, if you guys are like sleeping and you got to get up to use the bathroom, like you need to have like a flashlight or show some light around to make sure you don't end up stepping on a snake or coming across this snake.
Yeah.
And so Howard Thurman talks about, as he's hearing him say this, he's like training his body, and he's going over in his mind, like, okay, I'm going to keep a flashlight under my pillow. And he was like reenacting, like I'd go get the flashlight and I'd shine it on the snake. He's kind of training his body to be prepared to do that if he has to go up and use the bathroom when he's asleep. So his body just naturally does it without even like thinking about it.
Yeah.
And he says like, that's how the disadvantaged, and that's how people in the margins navigate society living in fear, is that they just naturally, without even thinking about it, navigate the world and their society in a way that like prevents violence from happening to them.
Yeah.
And I think this is a thing for Black people, but I also think it's a big thing for.
Dag nabbit. So sorry we had to cut it short, but good news is for as low as $5 a month, you can join our Patreon community and get the rest of the content in full on there. Go to my website, click on Patreon, or go to patreon.com/millennials in ministry. Until next time, you can get the rest on Patreon. Hey, you can get the rest on Patreon. I said you can get the rest on Patreon. Hey, you can get the rest on Patreon.